Hey there, everybody. It's me, Scott Marshall, and I am back with another edition of Shelf Reading, in which I'm going through my long boxes of comics one by one after recently kind of doing a purge, and I'm kind of going through what there is left, and some of it is pretty weird, so that's fun, right? This is the third long box of four, and then I've got a couple short boxes to go through, and then a whole bunch of shelves. So there's lots to look at. We'll get started here, picking up with I guess we're in the M's, and I am being a big Kirby guy, of course. I'm also a big fan of Mr. Miracle. And so this first one is a JLI special that was kind of a one shot about Mr. Miracle. Um, and it's fine. There's another one shot which I feel like I have somewhere, but I don't see it here. Um, that was illustrated by Steve Rude, and it was kind of a tribute to the Kirby stuff. It was really good. Uh, I think that's from the maybe mid '80s, something like that. So next up, we have the Tom King miniseries of Mr. Miracle with Mitch Gerrits, and I'll have to put that up on the shelf with the other Tom King stuff. I'll set that aside. And next up is a mini series from Vault. I'm just going to be a little careful with what I show to the camera because it is basically softcore porn. It's called Money Shot, Comes Again. And the main reason I picked it up was because the art is by the great Giselle Lagacé of Pixie Tricks Comics fame, and she does a lot of work, or did a lot of work for Archie and various other publishers. Did a nice run on Gem, the cartoon, truly outrageous Gem, right? Yeah, bit not quite my time. Okay, DC. I actually used to have the rest of this series, and I kind of recycled it back into the system because I didn't know if I really needed to have the original issues. Maybe someday I'll buy the trade or something. But I kept this kind of special issue of the Monkey Prince by Gene Yang and Cliff Chang, is it? I forget who the artist was. Oh, Bernard Chang, maybe. Anyway, so this is, a red envelope edition, good fortune in China. So that's kind of cool thing to do, I thought. And I love a different edition of a comic whenever possible. Not, I'm not a big fan of alternate covers and stuff like that. Um, but sometimes it depends. Next up is a series. I'm just looking through. Yeah, a series called The Moon is Following Us by the great Daniel Warren Johnson and Riley Rossmo and Mike Spicer. I need to catch up on this actually. There's like 9 issues that I've got so far. And after that, I should actually put this up on the shelf too, probably. I've got the Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey run of Moonlight with Jordi Belair. Pretty good run. It gets referenced a lot in the Marvel miniseries, or the DC Marvel TV miniseries. And then I've got the first issue of the more recent run of Moon Knight by local guy Jed McKay and cover there by Steve McNiven, also a local guy. Uh, this is a good run. I've been kind of jumping on and off, but Moon Knight is just one of those characters, um, one of those Marvel characters that I'll probably always kind of keep checking in on, and like Daredevil. I guess I basically like the Marvel Knights, if it's not, the cosmic space stuff, which is the other stuff that I like. Warlock, Micronauts. Anyway, onward. We have one issue of Mysteries of Unexplored Worlds, and oh, huh. Well, clearly the reason I kept this is because on the cover here we have Gillman. They're totally stealing the Gillman design. Okay, so we're done with the M's and now we're into the N's. And the first thing I have is 3 issues of the Nth Man, the Ultimate Ninja. This is a very goofy series from the, I want to say 80s. Yep. No, 90s. Late 80s, early 90s. By Larry Hama. I'd say that's the real appeal. The great, great Larry Hama. Uh, I don't know if it was always Ron Wagner on the art, but he seems to be doing these issues anyway. Um, anyway, just a very goofy kind of, if you know, like The Destroyer, that series, Remo Williams, kind of that tone. And we still have the America Russia 80s opposition going on there, so that's weird to see. Um, anyway, I have the first 8 issues of that series as well, but not in these boxes. So further on with the ends, we have one issue of something called New Age Comics, a little anthology sampler thing from, oh, is it from Mirage? No, it's from Fantagraphics. So there's ads through here from Vortex, from Kitchen Sink, from Renegade. I guess it's basically like a little distributor catalog supplement for indie publishers at the time. So some neat stuff in there. The cover has, uh, Megaton Man and Wonder Warthog, Maggie from Love and Rockets, not this guy who looks like Gnort, but I don't think that's who that is. I forget who that is. Prince Valiant and the Spirit, all indie heroes. That's gonna bug me. Anyway, after that we have, I don't know if it's the entire run or not, but certainly a run, the first 16 issues of New Burn by Chip Starsky and Jacob Phillips, and actually I need to finish that up. Very solid kind of crime suspense book. And that is followed by a pretty good book from DC so far. It's their current run of The New Gods, by Ram V and Evan Cagle. And what they've been doing, actually, it's pretty cool as I look over the credits here for each issue. They actually, the book, the structure of the book is that it kind of jumps back and forth between a couple periods in time. And so I believe it's always Evan Cagle doing the present day, and then they have guest artists basically every issue doing whatever the other time is, which might be a different character's point of view. It's kind of like Lost, basically. But it's not necessarily about, like, thematically, it's not the same as Lost, obviously. But very interesting, very cool book. in many ways, kind of see it as the DC's equivalent to Marvel's recent Kieran Gillen series of the Eternals, where somebody manages to get the Kirby flavor quite well, but the art style and the presentation is very much its own and very, in my opinion, very lovely. What do we got next? We have a bunch of The New Mutants, which was a favorite title of mine as a kid. Along with, it was a spin-off, of course, of the X-Men at a time when there was only one X-Men title. Imagine that. So they spun off the New Mutants basically as to appeal to a younger age group, i.e. me. They were the kids who were still in school, who were, still kind of learning how to use their powers, as opposed to the professional grade X-Men who were, out there traipsing around the universe, saving the universe. So yes, I have several of the better issues of the original series here, the ones that Bill Sienkiewicz drew. I actually dropped off the original series after a few years because I aged out, kind of. I went to college, and as the creative teams shifted on, I really didn't care for the early 90s Marvel. The people who became the Image guys didn't care for any of that stuff, so I just kind of let it drop for a long time, and would periodically check back. Every once in a while, Marvel would do a little reprint or update, like this special that they did with Claremont and Sienkiewicz, kind of recalling the glory days. And then they started publishing, of course, the X-Men comics kind of have gone through a lot of churn over the years. And I kind of dropped them for a while. I dropped a lot of Marvel comics, really, for most of the 90s, and picked them up again, basically with a title called New X-Men by Grant Morrison. And there should be a probably omnibus of it behind my head there somewhere. Yeah, it's right there. And that kind of got me back on board with what the X-Men were up to. They would kind of refresh the line, of course, every couple of years after that, and find new ways to deploy the X-Men. And I quite enjoyed this miniseries by, I think his name is Jonathan Rosenberg, called New Mutants Dead Souls. Just kind of, it's a new team organized by Magic and Rain, who are still working at the school, I believe, and they bring along a few other characters on. I believe it's an adventure that's kind of centered around Ilyana and her demonic-based powers, which makes sense. It's always bound to come back at you. And then I have a bunch more of the more recent New Mutants run by Jonathan Hickman, and all the Krakoa stuff, which I quite enjoyed. I only really read the New Mutants end of it, with a few occasional kind of crossovers. That, yeah, this is pretty much just all the Krakoa New Mutants issues. So we got pretty good run there. I put that up on the shelf too. One of my favorite comic books of all time, and arguably the greatest comic book of all time, is, of course, Next Wave. and this is a special edition of Next Wave called the Crayon Butchery Variant Edition, where I think it's basically just a non-colored version of one of the issues of Next Wave. Why not? Anyway, I have the full series of Next Wave, always close to hand, as you would want. And actually, as it happens, my copy of Next Wave is signed and sketched in by Stuart Immonen. Let's see here. Next up in the ends, we have a pretty cool series from Floating World Comics called Night Hunters, by Zirit, Baker, and Negrete. Sorry if I'm butchering your names, folks. Alexis Zirit, Dave Baker, Robert Negrete. This is, I see a lot of this kind of style of art lately, and I like it, where there's basically some very kind of bold coloring going on, very almost Paul Pope meets Don Simpson meets. Yeah, I hate to make a lot of comparisons and get reductive with art styles, but just to give you an idea of the zone we're kind of going in, kind of Gary Panter, kind of Martin Rosen a little bit. I believe these are British comics. So there's probably lots of other influences, like in 2000 AD or something that I'm missing. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. I do recommend it. What else we got here? Still in the ends, I got a few issues of The Nightman, which was a Malibu Comics title. I'm not sure if that got absorbed by DC eventually. And there was also, I believe, some kind of TV series based on this. Anyway, I picked it up mainly because it was being drawn by my old Appa Centauri compatriot, John Dennis. And he did a fine job. Also written by Steve Englehart, so that's pretty cool. And I feel like I recognize the inker, Thomas Floramonte. That name is familiar too, actually. Anyway, so Nightman. And I've got a couple issues of Night Force. The very short-lived, all too short-lived, kind of like a proto version of Justice League Dark, where they're getting. I don't think they actually had all of the. Yeah, this is 1982. So DC actually didn't have Alan Moore starting to knit together what would become Vertigo in the pages of Swamp Thing and pulling in all the supernatural characters that he eventually would. So the Night Force was by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. Bob Smith, inker. Don't know if I know that one. Anyway, just very dark and beautiful work for 1982. There were probably a few parents who picked this up for young kids, thinking, "Oh, comic books, this will be fine." Okay, I'm back, and we are into the O's. And I was just starting to look here at a very cool book called Odyssey but spelled, as you can see, in a very futuristic way, by the celebrated comics writer Matt Fraction and celebrated comics artist Christian Ward. And Ward is kind of known for this very bright, almost psychedelic sometimes, very painterly, but very effective, I think, comics. And I've become quite a fan of him since this series. Anyway, as the name implies, this is a science fiction retelling of Homer's The Odyssey. Highly recommend it. Okay, so I need to... Yeah, there we go. And next up, I have a one-shot by Jim Rugg from a couple years ago, I believe, called Oktobriana. I actually speak some Russian, so it's fun to see this kind of update of a just absolutely crazy Russian comic from the, I want to say, 70s? I'm not sure. But anyway, it's, 67. Wow, look at that. So it was a Russian underground, originally a Russian underground comic in the 60s. And so Rugg has kind of updated it in his incredible style. Anyway, a lot of fun, that book. Just trying to organize those. Okay, next up, we've got some oddball ones. There's a new 52 issue of OMAC, which I'm guessing I got because it has guest stars Frankenstein, Agent of Shade. See the last video for some discussion of that. First issue of Omega the Unknown by Steve Gerber and pals. Who did draw this? Mary Screens was his co-writer. Jim Mooney, I guess, drew this. Okay. Great series. I think I just have that spare loose issue because I picked it up somewhere. So, next up, we've got a single issue of Our Fighting Forces from 1965. It's number 94. Got no cover. The Human Blockbusters. No credits, of course. Doesn't. Okay, and we got a couple issues of classic Marvel Western, The Outlaw Kid. Quite old issues, actually. Number 4 and number 12. Who drew these? Of course, there's no credits. It's kind of interesting line work there. Look at the face on him. Certainly not a typical, well, maybe it was a typical Marvel comic of the time. I don't have that many comics, Marvel Western comics that are this old. Here is a house ad for the 7th issue of the Ringo Kid, and 12th issue of something called Mighty Marvel Western, which was an anthology of Rawhide Kid, Kid Colt, and Two Gun Kid. Oh, we used to have a lot of westerns. Look, here's another one for another house ad for Two Gun Kid and Kid Colt. Both of which were well up into the... Kid Colt was at issue 151 at that point. It's crazy. Anyway, yep, Outlaw Kid. I was always more of a Kid Colt guy myself, and not that I was much of a Western comics guy at all, I suppose. Next up, this is a funny old book that used to see all the time in the dollar bins. You probably won't quite see it there so much anymore. It's issue number 2 of Charlton's The Peacemaker. Well, Modern Comics, one of the variants of Charlton. Might have been a Canadian reprinter. Yeah, Modern Promotions. And, you know, it's not properly trimmed on the bottom. Bit of a cut rate organization compared to Marvel and DC back then. And this also has a backup story of the Fightin' Five, who I believe had their own book eventually. I don't recognize the credits though. Montes and Bosch. Don't know. Anyway, yep. One issue of Peacemaker that everyone has. This series is really cool. It's one of my favorites of the last few years, actually. Kieran Gillen and I'm not sure the first Caspar Wingard. Color by Mary Safro. Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. It's a 5-issue series, I guess. And so Peter Cannon Thunderbolt is probably the character you think about the least from the original Charlton characters who got turned into Watchmen. But he's kind of, I think he's kind of converted along with Judo Master into Ozymandias in The Watchmen. So anyway, this series by Kieran Gillen, who's the co-creator of the Young Avengers and the excellent fantasy series Die, which I talked about in the first video. This one is very much a deconstruction of Watchmen and the various incarnations of it and those kinds of comics even. Yeah, I should reread this actually. And it's all like through the lens of this actual old character, Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. So it's kind of like if this was a movie, it would be something of a Lego sequel, but it's pulled off quite well, and I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Gillen do more stuff like that. Okay, next up, just a single issue of this, but I used to have pretty much the whole series, I think, and if I ever came across a trade of it, I would certainly pick it up. And that is Kyle Baker's series of Plastic Man, which I believe is one issue, a typical issue. 95? 05? I guess it's 2005. Anyway, just wonderful classic animation, squash and stretch stuff. I mean, it's Plastic Man, so that's what it would be like, right? And Kyle Baker is just such a natural at this, visual gags, physical comedy, wonderful color treatments, and everything he does is just very interesting to look at and also very compelling to read, I find. So you can't go wrong with Mr. Kyle Baker. Next up in the bin is not the whole run, but a lot of the run of Plop. And this comic is huge for me. In fact, I made a comic about wanting to buy an issue of this comic when I was young. So every issue of Plop, the cover is by Basil Wolverton, who is just a great kind of golden age weird, very weird style artist. And then inside is, as you might expect, it's kind of Mad Magazine style. There's a lot of satire, parodies, gag comics by different artists. Um, but I would say the main reason to seek out issues of Plop uh, is because it's probably the closest thing you're going to see to EC Comics in the 70s. DC, who also published Plop, um, already had a bunch of, or were about to have a bunch of popular horror titles like The House of Mystery, House of Suspense, Unexpected, and so on. Um, Plop took a lot of those same artists and put them into satirical, basically humor infused versions of much the same stories. There's one in this first issue by drawn by Bernie Wrightson. Here's a two-pager drawn by Alfredo Alcala. Like, it's wild, the talent in here. There's Wally Wood in a later issue doing an adaptation of Lord of the Rings, which had a big impact on me as a kid, because it was just so amazing, the art and the adaptation. Again, first issue, here's a satire of both King Kong and Godzilla, I guess, by George Evans and Frank Robbins. Anyway, it's insane that there isn't a nice deluxe collection of Plop DC. I don't know what the fuck you're sitting on it for. Pardon my language. But it's one of the great uncollected classics. Uh, Here's a fun little book by an artist named Lee Hawley called Ponytail. And I might have a few. I certainly have a few more issues of comics like this. Oh, stuff is starting to fall over. Mainly because I really admire the kind of Hank Ketchum style of this art. It's not Archie, it's more abstract. Um, but I don't know, I just find it very weirdly energetic and dynamic and just fun, just fun all ages comics. Although it is ostensibly, I guess, about teens, it feels more childlike than even your average Archie comic does. Um, anyway, and here is an issue of a comic called Val. It doesn't seem to have a cover. And I forget the name of this artist, but I quite like their style. Not always necessarily on the faces. Like, look at this guy. Hello, I am. Yeah. But there's again fun kind of physical comedy art, kind of adjacent to like a Sam Schwartz over at Archie. Some nice flourishes. Kind of a fun cast. Like, here's a nice. I wonder if this comic actually was influential on the Hernandez brothers at all. Catch a little flavor of it there. Here is a single issue of Popeye. I assume, published by Delacorte in the 60s. No cover. Popeye and Haunted Island by Bud Sagendorf, or whatever poor bastard was trying to draw like Bud Sagendorf. Oh, that's fun. I've got a giant treehouse. There are great Popeye comics, but I suspect that is not one of them. Next up, we are back into the Kieran Gillen. And I think these are a bit out of order, but it's basically the first dozen or so issues of his series the Power Fantasy, also with Casper Wingard on art. Need to catch up on finishing that one, actually. Behind. We got one issue of Luke Cage Power Man, the 70s Marvel title. This one's written by Tony Isabella, hey, Ron Wilson, and Dave Hunt on the art. And first issue of Power Pack. How's that? Who created Power Pack? Oh, of course, it's Louise Simonson and June Brigman. Don't remember June Brigman. Bob Wyachek is the inker. Joe Rosen on letters. Cool. I was never a huge Power Pack fan. It's a book for, I was well past this age level by the time this came out. But it was certainly well loved at the time, and I think it's been revived once or twice since. Next up, lovely mini-series. Looks like maybe I might be missing a couple issues, or they're more likely just out of order here in the box. But anyway, book called Precious Metal, which is by Darcy Van Polgeist, Ian Bertram and Matt Hollingsworth, among others. And it's related to another great kind of indigenous-themed fantasy, future fantasy title called Little Bird. Also highly recommend if you can find it. That's another one I need to catch up on. It's just really beautiful, beautiful art. Little Bird, too. Next up, the great Jeff Smith and his very I actually need to finish reading this, but I've read the first volume of it, I believe, Razzle, which is kind of a dimension hopping fantasy series aimed at an older audience than Bone was, and not really kind of superhero theme like his Shazam book was. But what I have read of it, I quite enjoyed. Now we got some Rawhide Kids, back into the Westerns for a sec here. Rawhide Kid story at the back. Doesn't get much better than that. Here's another issue of Rawhide Kid, 125. And The Raven. I remember this issue, I think. Art by Jack Davis. Cool. And lettering by Artie Simic. Simic. Let's call the whole thing off. Oh dear. Okay. Now we're into some R's. Here is a little anthology called Read More Comics with an X. James Spencer, David Craig, Rob Mirsky. Right on. And this is the 5th issue. Nice job. Next up, here's my old friend John Dennis again on some issues of The Realm from Caliber, including a couple issues of a miniseries, Demon Storm. I don't know if they actually finished that series or not, but they made it up past issue 20 anyway. All right. here's another anthology. This one is called Resist, and I'm guessing it is to do with. This is the second issue. I'm guessing it has to do with Commodore with Comrade Trump's first term. A lot of feminine, yeah, comics about the feminist kind of resistance to Trump. As well we should. Next up, a few issues of the Rocketeer Adventure magazine, classic comic by Dave Stevens, from 1988 looks like, and I should put this, got the other Rocketeer stuff up there on the shelf, so I'll put this up on the shelf with it. There are these two issues of one story, and then, yeah, it's kind of a final mini-series before, sadly, Dave Stevens left us. Well, there have been some great teams do Rocketeer stories since, of course. And here's one of them. Special with a bunch of people. Adam Hughes, Jay Lee, Danny Bilson, Paul DeMeo. Yeah. It's Rocketeer one shot. I'll toss that up there too. Next up, looks like I've got a bunch of issues, quite a few issues actually, of Rom the Space Knight. This was one of the more popular toy-based comics that Marvel produced in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. I don't know how popular the Rom toy ever was. I do vaguely remember it. But people certainly loved the comic, and they managed to kind of get him really insinuated into the Marvel Universe for a while there. I know, much like the Micronauts, there have been some kind of deluxe omnibus editions recently. So they're back in print. But I don't know if I'll ever bother getting those. This is the kind of title that I like to just collect casually if it ever comes my way in a box full of stuff. Okay, well, geez, this one looks this one looks a bit bad. Romantic Secrets. Ruth, what's wrong? Well, first of all, her name is Ruth. Oh dear. Yeah, on the side there we have an empty pill bottle and water. Jeez, that is sad. That's not romantic, guys. Come on. What are we doing? Okay, next up we have a couple issues of Sad Sack. Always had a soft spot for these silly old army-themed comics by George Baker. Just imagine the poor bastards in the actual military passing the time reading them. We got a couple issues here of Safe Sex, which was an indie title, well, image title, that was kind of themed around sex work, and I think I must have kept this one. I'm not sure. I know there was a bunch of issues of this where the covers were by Tula Lute or some other artist that I was collecting. Anyway, I'm not sure why I have these two particular issues in the box, but I'm sure it made sense at the time. Here is the first issue of Saga, signed to Scott, but not to me. It was just signed to someone named Scott, and then Cal at Strange Adventures, my comic shop, kept asking online, does anybody want this first issue of Saga signed to someone named Scott? So I popped up and said, well, my name is Scott. I wouldn't mind a first issue of Saga signed to me. And that's how I have this. Good book. Although I'm way behind on Saga. Several volumes behind. What do we got next? We got a whole bunch of award-winning comic, The Santos Sisters. How do you even... I don't know how you even describe the Santos Sisters for people. It's, as you can imagine, it's uh, a, a vibes tribute to many kind of 70s and 80s all ages comics, shall we say. Obviously very Archie influenced, but others as well. I'd say there's a certain amount of influence of Larry Wells and Cherry and that kind of stuff, because there's definitely some kind of not even porn like softcore porn, but it's just very it's a bit sexy. It's a bit spicy. Well, for example, check out the boob window on this lady. So it's for definitely for the older kids, by which I mean, oh well, actually it says right on here age 13 plus, which I would say is very reasonable. Um, Maybe even a bit older than that, depending on the maturity level of the kid. Um, and they also appear sometimes in this other title from Floating World called American Nature. I'm not sure how often that happens, but yeah, I guess American Nature is the name of the line. Yeah, name of their publishing company, maybe their imprint. Anyway, fun book. Next up, another fun book, Scooby-Doo Team Up. I only seem to have one issue of it, but they're teaming up with the Doom Patrol, and I believe that's basically what the book was. It was teaming up with different corners of the DC universe. Continuing through with the S's here. Got, looks like about a dozen and a half issues of DC horror title called Secrets of Haunted House, which is one of their many 70s horror books, with a rotating cast of artists, I would think. I see one here with a script by Arnold Drake. Quite nice artwork by someone named Tenny Henson. I don't know the name, but it's a bit unusual. Here's one with story by David Michelini and art by Ernie Chua and Bill Drott. Certainly guys that you would see in a DC book back then. What else we got here? Oh, E. Nelson Bridwell. Win Mortimer art, that's cool. Joe Orlando and Dick Giordano, of course. Oh. Now, those of you who are fans of the Sandman, Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, you're probably already aware that some of his cast of The Endless were already in DC Comics, just not with all the mythology perhaps woven around them. That's Destiny, one of the Endless there at the beginning of this issue. Anyway, I'm always a fan of the DC horror titles. It's another one of those books that I'll just pick up if I come across it. Oh, here's a single issue of a Charlton romance comic, Secrets of Young Brides. I wonder what some of those secrets might be. My husband is gay. Oh no. Oh boy. Um, yeah, kind of pretty functional romance comic art here. I must look up who the artists were, but I don't see any. I don't see anything very compelling here. Maybe this one actually. Oh, for the days when comics had credits. Anyway, I'll look that up, but I think there's an artist that I recognize there in the end. Let's see what we got here next. We've got a few issues of it's a Marvel. I guess it was an ongoing series called Secret Warriors, and I assume it was spun out of the more recent Secret Wars miniseries event thing that Marvel had a while back. I probably picked these up just because I was into Mr. Hickman's work at the time, but I've never actually read that whole series. We've got a single issue of Seduction of the Innocent, which was an old Eclipse anthology where they basically just reprinted some classic pre-comics code horror comics back at a time when even like it wasn't that easy to find reprints of EC comics, for example. Here's a comic by Frazetta. It's nice. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I used to have this whole series once upon a time, but got rid of it at some point. Speaking of having the whole series of something, I had all of the. I guess I can't really show this one on camera. It's Pornographic by Jen Bartel, issue of Sex Criminals. And here's one that I can show of Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky with their faces missing. Yeah, I have all this in different forms, but I kept these because of the covers. Ooh, Jen Bartel. Let's see. A single issue of Sergeant Preston, the famed man of the mounted police, keeping the Yukon in order. And then we've got a couple issues. Looks like about half a dozen issues of Our Army at War, which eventually just came to be known as just Sergeant Rock, because he was, after a while, he was kind of the main character of our Army at War. There were some other features in that title for a while too. Enemy Ace and the Haunted Tank and so on, but they often migrated to launch other war titles, or they would kind of come and go depending on the interest. A lot of classic Joe Kubert art in these Sergeant Rock stories, of course, which is certainly the main reason to recommend them, I think. And Next up, I've got a couple issues of the Young Animal series of Shade the Changing Girl. I was a fan of its predecessor, Shade the Changing Man, the Ditko series back in the day. So I picked that up to see what it was like, and I enjoyed it well enough. But I don't know. The Young Animal titles didn't really grab me um, for the most part. Probably just, you know, uh, wasn't the same kind of sense of discovery for me the way that it might have been for younger readers. I had already experienced that with DC's Vertigo imprint years ago, and it struck me as a very similar kind of effort. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Vertigo was pretty good. Next up, I have got a couple issues of a small press and I believe Canadian produced book called Shadow Star. And it's kind of a science fiction title, I believe. Larry Shapiro and Ed Savage. Distributed by Bud Plant. Oh no, these guys were actually in California. My mistake. Anyway. Oh, interesting. The third issue of this is apparently the first credit for Ron Lim as a penciler. Here you go. So yes, Shadow Star, and then I've got a single issue of a one-shot called Sham Comics. Actually, it's not a one-shot. There's a bunch of issues of Sham Comics. Kind of a Mystery Science Theater 3000 approach to classic public domain comics, where they're rescripting crazy old artwork. Certainly not the kind of thing I can relate to. No, it's yeah, fun. I don't know how I randomly picked this up, but whatever. Next up, a whole bunch of issues of Shang-Chi and different. I mean, it's all like the most recent run, I guess, by Gene Young, and then they've got a few different art teams, I believe. Marcus Toe. And then some sweet covers as well. So there's a bunch of Shang-Chi, including there's another series called Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. I might be filing these out of order. We'll see. Okay, next up, the original Captain Marvel, Shazam. It's one of the DC 100-page dollar comics that they sold quite a lot in the 70s as a way to kind of combine reprints from the 40s and 50s with a few current new pages. I was always happy with that deal, personally, especially since the original Captain Marvel artist, C.C. Beck, who did it back in the 30s, came back to DC in the 70s to pick the character up again. It's pretty wild. We've got an issue of the She-Hulk, the old original series, number 5, written by David Anthony Kraft. Wow. Artists were Mike Vosberg and Chick Stone. We've got another She-Hulk one-shot here that's more recent. which I'm guessing I picked up because the cover is by Giselle Lagacé again from New Brunswick. Anyway, next up we got a single issue of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've got a collection of the Steranko issues up there on the shelf, but this one is written by Steve Parkhouse and penciled by Barry Smith. Interesting. And I'm guessing he's doing something of a Steranko impression here, but it's a pretty good one. Pretty good. After that, we have a couple more issues of S.H.I.E.L.D., but this is a more recent series by Jonathan Hickman, which I must have just picked up randomly. Definitely have not finished it. I recall liking what I saw, though. Next up is a reprint of an issue of the Silver Surfer, where he meets Spider-Man, and I believe I have I've got a Essentials volume of the Silver Surfer up there with all the classic Romita run. Here is a single issue of Silver Surfer Ghost Light. Next up, we've got a mini-series by one of our favorite recent imports, comics writer Ed Brisson. Good series. Hard-boiled stuff with monsters, which, best kind, I think. Next up, we've got an issue of 6 from Sirius by Doug Monk and Paul Gulacy. One of those fun epic comics. Oh, this is 6 from Sirius too. My apologies. Epic Comics was kind of the Vertigo of Marvel Comics for a while there. Creator-owned books. And they had some pretty cool stuff. Most notably, their color reprint of Akira by Otomo. Okay, next I got the first 2 issues of Skull the Slayer. And that was I don't know if this was another, like, kind of Robert E. Howard book, or just something they made up themselves. Seems like maybe it was something they made up themselves. Written by Marv Wolfman, Steve Gann, artist. Not sure who that is. The second issue, it's looking kind of like a Gil Kane cover. Marv Wolfman wrote it, Steve Gann, artist again. Okay, well, art's decent, certainly. Who are you, Steve Gann? What became of you? Next up, a single issue of Space Adventures with what looks like Captain Atom, Charlton Comics. Number 10, yep, Captain Atom. Not the greatest looking art, but it is a Charlton comic after all. And then back up, Ditko story called The Decision, which looks like the usual Ditko hectoring over something. Got a couple Spider-Mans. King size special number 8, featuring the Shocker. Want to avoid the Shocker, Spider-Man. And number 84, which apparently features the Kingpin. Kingpin Strikes Back. And We're well out of Ditko at this point. It is Lee, Buscema, Ramada, Ramita? Anyway. Dr. Specter's Spine-Tingling Tales. There's some kind of big ghost coming out of the water there. This is issue number 4. This is a Gold Key comic, which they had this distribution arrangement with a children's book company, Whitman. I don't know if that was just for Canada or only for certain types of books, maybe. Anyway, decent art. No credits, of course. Okay, got a couple issues of Spiritus. A comic from Vault a few years ago. I don't know if this ever got finished or not, but I quite liked it. Just very cool. Very cool art. Kind of has the same vibe as the Cyberpunk video game. And next we got a few issues of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, especially the zine issue, which is a fun single issue there. I really need to... I have read most of Squirrel Girl over the years, but I really probably should get a nice omnibus of it sometime. Here's a single issue of Star Slayer, the Log of the Jolly Roger, Mike Grell book from the 80s. This is issue number 6, and apparently it is a pulse-pounding conclusion. Okay. It seems to me... Yeah, there's a few... Every so often these books will have fun little backup features. Okay. Alright, next we've got a whole bunch of more Ryan North comics, basically, because it's a whole bunch of Star Trek Lower Decks. Possibly all of the comics so far about Star Trek Lower Decks, which is one of my favorite Star Treks. And it sucks that it's over. There we go. Alright, last stack. We got a bunch of issues of Steeple by John Allison. Steeple is a very fun story of a young, I guess she's a seminary student who goes to basically intern in a small, mysterious English town where it turns out the local vicar is quietly fighting a war against demons that plague the town. It's a lot of fun. And there's another issue of Lower Decks. I'll put that with the others. And last but certainly not least, local guy again, Jed MacKay, and his series of Strange, which of course is spun out of Doctor Strange, who for a while was dead in Marvel Comics. So this is kind of the story of his apprentice Clea replacing him for a while And then I believe don't worry folks, I believe he comes back. But anyway, always down for some Doctor Strange. And that is the end of that box. So I'm going to shut this one down and edit it up and post it to the web, and you guys can enjoy my blathering. We'll be back probably this time next week with the last of the long boxes. See you then.